Okay, so a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Priscilla Liebert-Calder. I'm the event coordinator for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Ndoro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on preparing for the PPP loan forgiveness. For those of you who are not aware of the SBDC, which stands for Small Business Development Centers, we are a premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and entrepreneurs in New Jersey, particularly those in Essex County. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network. And our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a partnership agreement between the United States Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs and business owners start and grow sustainable and successful small businesses. And we do this through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. For the benefit of those who are attending today's webinar, audio has been muted, and we will be taking questions via the chat or the Q&A feature here on Zoom. So please feel free to post your questions, and we'll do our best to respond either during or at the end of the presentation. And we do ask that you post those questions as quickly as possible. We do have a full house today, and I'm hoping or expecting that we'll have a lot of questions. A copy of the presentation slides along with a video recording of this webinar will be emailed out within 48 to 72 hours. So I know a lot of you asked for that, so please be on the lookout for that after the presentation ends. So it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today, Mary Baker. Mary is the owner of Baker Tax Accounting Service. It's a tax preparation and bookkeeping service in Linden, New Jersey. She is also an SBDC consultant for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. So without further ado, I will turn today's proceedings over to Mary.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. How is everyone doing today on this Friday afternoon? Thank you so much. It is my honor to be with you on this Friday afternoon to share some important information about the PPP. My name is Mary. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Mary Baker. I am the CEO of Baker Tax and Accounting and Get Your Business in Order. I have been educating small business, mid-sized business for over 40 years. I am kind of aging myself a little bit, but it is a pleasure to be here. I have been assisting businesses in applying for PPP, SBA loans, and things like that, just helping them to get their finances in order so that they can get the most out of these programs. Also, I find it so important that with the PPP, it's so important that businesses know how will they qualify to receive loan forgiveness to the fullest on these PPP loans. And so with that being said, today we are going to talk about how to prepare for the loan forgiveness, because that time is coming up soon. People are receiving emails from their banks saying that they are ready or they are ready to accept the form, the application form to apply for loan forgiveness. So with today we're going to go into what is PPP, right? And how do we prepare for loan forgiveness on this loan, right? Because the main thing is that we want to get 100% forgiveness for this loan. And so making sure that you have all your ducks in the row, your documents in the row will qualify you for preparing for this loan. The PPP, which means Payroll Protection Program, because of COVID-19, the SBA established a loan because of the 2020 CARE Act. The primary purpose of the PPP loan is to help business to retain their staff, meet payroll, and pay essential expenses. And so saying essential expenses, the SBA had a guideline of what expenses can be paid from this PPP loan. Unfortunately, it's not all the expenses for our business, it's just specific expenses, and we will go over that. You may be eligible for 100% of the forgiveness if you submit your paperwork correctly. And so when I say this, this is so important because if you don't submit your paper correctly, they may not forgive you 100%. And so with this being said, it's so important that you have all those documents in order. The forgiveness can be up to $10 million, which is great. I look at that as additional income that we have in, and that we could allocate our other courses to other things. There was no personal guarantee or collateral requirement for this loan. There was no minimum FICO score for this loan. And of course, the banks charge you no fee to process this loan, right? And so with that being said, we would like to see, okay, what is the loan? How about if I don't qualify 100%? What is the guidelines? What is the loan terms? Because they did send us, I say, a book of papers, contracts to sign, but most people did not go into detail or read every line to cover the loan. If you do not qualify for 100% of the loan, the terms of the loan set by SBA is that it would be 1% interest rates. They deferred the payment for the first payment for 6 months, and the loan is payable for 2 years, up to 2 years. And so if you don't qualify for all of the forgiveness, but we know everyone that's on this webinar today is going to qualify for 100% forgiveness. This will give you time in advance to prepare for it when you're submitting this information to your bank, right? So the first thing we need to consider is what is considered as expenses according to the PPP loans. This is a list of some of the expenses, the major expenses that you can use to qualify for loan forgiveness. The number one expense and the primary cost, the primary reason for the loan was payroll costs. And so in order to qualify for forgiveness, you were supposed to use 60% of the loan amount towards payroll costs, okay? This includes people who had employees as well as self-employed. The self-employed people always ask the question, do I qualify, or I did not qualify, but you did qualify. So we just have to keep in mind, if anything else you get out of this today, is that 60% of your PPP loan was to go towards payroll costs. You can also use the other 40% towards healthcare benefits. If you supply healthcare benefits for your employees and you paid for this healthcare benefits, you can include that into your loan. Okay? Your rent, if you're renting an office location or a store location, you can include that in that. Also, your lease, that also can be included. Unfortunately, your mortgage, if you own the building, cannot be included, but your mortgage interest can be included in the PPP loan. Your insurance premiums that you pay for the business can be included in the loan expenses. Also, you can include your utilities. So if you had overhead costs, utilities, telephone, things like that, internet service is considered to be a utility, and you can also include that in your loan expenses. Another thing that you can include was your business debt interest. So say if you had a business debt, a prior loan, or anything like that, you can also include your business debt interest. Not the principal, but you can include the interest. There may be other expenses that your lender will include as PPP loan expenses that can apply towards the 40%. I suggest that you contact your lender directly and ask them what else can you include for loan forgiveness as your expenses. Now, in the beginning, I just want to note this. In the beginning, it was the covered period of expenses for PPP was 8 weeks. They had extended it to 24 weeks. You can contact your bank, and ask them, can you extend it? But if you did it in 8 weeks, that's great too, to cover the expenses. My recommendation though, to each and every one of you, if you have already spent the money for PPP and it covered under any of these expenses that's listed, I would suggest that you submit your forgiveness application to your bank as soon as possible, because that way you don't have to worry about whether or not you spend the money or did not spend the money, or are you crossing lines on any of the stuff that's going on. My suggestion is whatever expenses you use, you make sure you have a record of all of those expenses. So now what we're going to get into, is everyone okay so far with everything on the PPP? So our main focus today is to prepare for loan forgiveness, right? We want to prepare when we are submitting our forgiveness application to our banks or agency, wherever you receive the loan from. That's so important, because I don't want anyone not to get 100% forgiveness. And I think the sooner you place it in, the better off you are if you spent all of the money. If you went for the 24 weeks period and you haven't spent all the money, that's fine as well. But if you have spent all the money, I suggest that you submit the application as soon as possible. Okay? So we're going to go to record keeping of the PPP loan forgiveness and what happens. What you need to keep it. I always say this here is a little bit different for PPP forgiveness, is a little bit different for the record keeping as we would normally for our businesses. It's always great to have great record keeping for our business, but for PPP, our goal is to get 100% forgiveness, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure we get 100% forgiveness on this. So I don't know if you're doing your record keeping as a business owner, or if you have an accountant that's doing this information for you, we want to make sure that the record keeping for PPP is totally separate from your normal record keeping for your entire business, right? The government hasn't came out with the full tax or how they're going to deal with things. Right now, it's saying it's not going to be taxable, but we have to be careful of what we spent with the PPP money and what we normally spend on our business, because we don't know when tax season come up, how is the government going to deal with this? Are they, the expenses that we spend, is that going to be deductible or not, right? So we will need to know how to deal with this. Right now, I see someone are asking some questions. I don't know, Priscilla, if you want to bring 2 or 3 questions before I go on with the record keeping, or we can hold the questions until the end. Okay?
Um, well, there's some questions right now, but let's see. How to deal with an occasional employee. Oh, can you use the PPP for more than 60% of payroll expenses?
Yes, you definitely can use it for more than payroll 60%. You can actually use it for 100% of payroll expenses.
Okay.
But the problem was when the PPP first came out, a lot of companies felt that all of the funds that they received, their payroll wouldn't cover it all. And so that's why it was originally 75-25 and they raised it to 60-40, because a lot of the companies were saying that their payroll would not cover the entire loan amount. So yes, you can use it 100%. If you use it 100%, that's even better, because now your accounting and record keeping is minimal.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Some of these questions have a lot of places, so let's leave it until the end. Let's go through the presentation. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we will have time to answer any questions that you may have at the end if you have any questions. Thank you so much. And so the first main thing, and I don't know if your bank or organization where you received the loan from had indicated to you, that I hope each and every one of you, when you receive the loan amount, that you open up a separate bank account just for your PPP dollars, right? And the reason why we say this is because we did not, if they go in and say just, for whatever, anyone did a soft audit or audit, we want to be able to say, look, I used all of this PPP dollars for these expenses. And so the problem is, if we commingle it with our normal business account that we have, how do we distinguish the difference between you using that money for, other than what the covered expenses are, or you didn't use the money, you used the money for personal. So the first thing I hope each and every one of you did was set up a separate bank account that covered the PPP dollars, right? If you did not do that, my recommendation is to go back into that bank account where those funds were direct deposited into, and make sure you itemize the items that covered PPP from that PPP dollars. If you use an accountant or bookkeeper, you want to make sure you go back to the accountant or the bookkeeper and let them know, okay, this is the amount of money I received from the PPP loan, and this is what should be allocated for that PPP loan. Because like I said, at the end of the year, when the new tax laws come out, we do not know how the IRS wants us to deal with that money, right? We don't know if they're going to allow us to not deduct it or not. but we know there will be something itemizing on our tax return how we should have handled that money. And the reason why I say that is because if you say, just for instance, if you got audited by the IRS or the state, you need to be able to say to them, hey, this was PPP money and this is what was used with that money. You need to distinguish that, because I'm quite sure 100% they're going to have some type of guideline dealing with that type of money. Okay? With the business bank account. So if you have not set up a separate bank account, that's fine as well. You just have to remind yourself, your accountant, your bookkeeper, that right now, if you absorbed all the money, right now we need to figure out what part of this money went to PPP, because you are going to have to submit that proof when you apply for your loan forgiveness loan. Okay? So you need to separate that and get that separated now, okay? Because also we want to be prepared. You want to be prepared now so that you don't go over the time or the extension or anything like that where you will not be qualified for loan forgiveness. So that's so important that you do. Okay, on that. So I hope you had a separate business bank account, but if you did not, that's fine. You just need to itemize what was used from that loan money. The second thing is a separate payroll withdrawal account. I always say you should always have a separate payroll account, even without PPP. But with PPP, you should have had a separate, what I had recommended to my clients was that take that money, take the PPP money, put it in a separate account for payroll, and let the payroll come out of that account. That way, you have a clean cut, you have a shot of what came out of there, you have a clean cut of what payroll came out of that, and then that's all. If it covered 100% of your PPP loan, then you would just have your payroll reports that you would need to submit to the loan forgiveness with the loan forgiveness application. And going forward, you should always keep a separate payroll account from your regular operating account in your business. But for PPP, you're going to have to know exactly what was covered, expenses for your PPP loan. That makes sense to everyone? Makes sense? These are just some simple record keeping that you need to cover for the PPP, but you can also implement this in your business once PPP is over. Another record keeping point is covering the forgiveness period. As I said before, it used to be 8 weeks period. They increased it to 24 weeks because a lot of the business owners basically did not could not cover the whole amount for 8 weeks payroll period. So if it's better for you to qualify for 100% loan forgiveness, then go to 24 weeks. If you covered it in 8 weeks, that's fine. But if you want to go to 24 weeks, that's fine as well to cover to get 100% forgiveness. You just have to let your bank or your loan institution know that you want 8 weeks versus 24 weeks. This is starting to come up. The banks are now saying it's open so that you can start submitting your loan forgiveness. So just make sure you're in contact with your banks or loan organization where you received the loan from and let them know what period you want to cover. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. Okay. The next thing we said is the payroll, which the primary purpose of the PPP loan was for payroll so that we was able to keep our staff, our full-time employees. That's what it was for. Payroll covers employees with W-2. It does not cover independent contractors. If you are self-employed, it did cover the owner's payroll, but not anyone that you hired as independent contract. Payroll is considered employees that are on W-2s. You ran payroll reports for, that's what payroll, but not independent contractors. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind when you're submitting the loan forgiveness, because we don't want to submit the loan forgiveness and include 100% loan forgiveness, and then we want to include independent contractors, and then the bank say, hey, we can't cover them, so you can't receive 100% loan forgiveness. So just always keep that in mind. What you need to do, and I say because they're starting to open up the loan forgiveness application, is to produce your payroll reports. You need to get that together. I know if you use like Paychecks or ADP, they create a specific report that covers your PPP loan forgiveness. So most of the larger payroll companies does have a report. You could just call your payroll rep and say, hey, I need this PPP expense report for my payroll, and they will produce that for you, okay, in detail. You can also, for payroll reports, include your bank statements, verifying that payroll was coming out of your bank statements, okay? You need that to verify how many employees you have, what's your pay rate, right? And the total amount of payroll that you paid for each month. That makes sense for each payroll during the 8 or 24 weeks period. Okay, makes sense? So you want to definitely get those payroll reports. If you have a payroll company, if you have an accountant that's running your payroll, they should be able to supply that information to you. Or if you use your bank statements, you're going to have to identify on your bank statements, this is payroll and this is what came out of payroll. If you pay your employees with your company check, my recommendation is get a copy of the cash check so that it coincides with your bank statement if you're using your bank account statement as opposed to a payroll report, just to show proof that it's 100%. And the reason why I say this is because I cannot stress, if you have this stuff up front, when you submit your forgiveness application, it will qualify you more for 100% forgiveness as opposed to the bank denying you 100% and just portion of the forgiveness. So it's so important. The next thing that you need to have is your payroll tax filing for the IRS. You need to have proof that you paid your taxes, your employer taxes for the IRS. You want to submit that because, for instance, in your bank account, you may have what you paid in payroll, but it doesn't show what you paid payroll taxes because it's not specifically going to say that. So you want to make sure that you show proof that you paid your payroll taxes between the 8 or 24 week period. It's so important that you know and that they know that you filed these taxes, that you actually spent this money on the expenses that are covered, okay, on your IRS payroll taxes. We don't know. I'm just saying, I don't know. We don't know if it's coinciding. How is the government sharing this information with each other? We just don't know that as of yet. Are there any glitches in here or anything like that? But I do believe that they will be sharing this information with each other and making sure that we are reporting this information on our tax returns properly. So just make sure, like I said, they haven't did any of the tax rules. That's usually come in December. And I know there will be changing tax rules, updating tax rules so that all of this information is included. Okay. The next one we have is the state income, payroll, and unemployment insurance filing. I cannot stress to you how important this really is. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if this loan is coming from the government or, right, the SBA, they will have a record of what they paid each and every one of us through PPP, right? And so if we have on our taxes that we pay state income taxes for our employees, payroll taxes, and unemployment taxes, the state will know, definitely will know if we paid these taxes and it's up to date. Like I said before, I don't know how these agencies and the government is sharing this information, but I do know that they will be um, looking at this information. They may do some soft audits on our businesses. We don't know yet. We don't know how they're going to deal with this, but I just hope all of you have filed these or have records of them. If you don't have it, get it from your payroll company, get it from your bookkeeper, ask for this information from your accountant. Just make sure you have this. And if you have this before you submit your loan application, submit it. The more you submit, the more you'll qualify to be 100% forgiven for all of the dollar amounts that you receive. So is everyone okay on this, and is everyone clear on this so far? Okay. All righty. So we're going on. I know this is a lot for record keeping, but we have to do this that so we make sure that everyone has our goal is to make sure everyone gets 100% forgiveness, right? Everyone wants to not pay any of this money back, right? So this is great. And the next thing, if you paid any as an employer, if you paid any employees benefits, anything that you paid employee benefits for, you want to have some type of documentation. And so let me just be clear here. When we say documentation, and some of you may say, well, if it comes out of my bank account, they should see that. That's not how they always look at it. It can show on your bank account, but then they need additional proof. Is that what it was used for, right? If that was actually paid. So say, for example, you paid it with a check, right? You have a check and they say, okay, send me proof. But they want to see a cash check. They want to make sure that whatever you paid on the back of it, they cash this check for what you said is for. So even though you have the check, they want to make sure that this check was cashed and paid to who you say you paid it to and for what it was paid for, the purpose of the check. So make sure you have documents if you paid any health benefits for your employee, any type of benefits that you paid for your employee. Ask that company to send you some type of proof that you paid for this information. Does that make sense to everyone? If you have any type of employee benefits, you want to have other than your check, you want to have a canceled check and any type of contract or agreement that you have with who's ever supplying you with these type of benefits, right? The next thing, which is important, as I said previously, is your business mortgage payment. Remember, I said to you, the mortgage payment is not covered, but the interest is covered, right? So, this is the one time in life that we would benefit of them taking more of the interest than the principal on our mortgage loan, right? And so, to show what interest you paid for business mortgage payment, you're going to need a copy. When you completed that application for the mortgage, they should have sent you um, an amortization table showing what you would pay for principal and what you would pay for interest. If you don't have it, you could just call your mortgage company. They can send you that document showing how much interest was paid during the 8 or 24 weeks period. So it's so important that you have a record of the amortization table, and you also want a copy of your lender's account statement. And so, as we know, some of us who own properties, when you get your monthly statement, it shows how much that dollar amount is going towards mortgage and how much is going towards interest. You want to have a copy of that, and if it's not on that, then you need to send the amortization table to show that this is the amount I paid for interest, right? This is the amount I paid for interest out of my PPP funds. It's so important that you have that documentation. For rent payments, you need a copy of your current lease agreement. Now, this is the catcher, and I know all of you are saying, well, gee, do I need all of this? Do I have to have this? They did, because they didn't ask us for this information up front, right? So we didn't have to submit any of this up front. But we're hoping that we have all of this documentation so that I can get 100% forgiveness, right? I don't want to pay back any of this loan amount. I appreciate it. I used the funds for what I needed to use it for, and here's the documentation. So for your rent payment, if you have a copy of your current lease agreement, you need to submit that with your loan forgiveness application as well. If that's fine with the bank, if that's enough, that's great. If they want to and they need you to present canceled checks, that's fine as well. You just have to give them canceled checks. A little note on that, on a side note, if you are a business owner, and I'm going to say this for a reason, if you are a business owner, you should always on your monthly bank statements get copies of your canceled checks. The banks will charge you a little fee. Now they charge us a fee, $5, $10, or $20 a month to get a copy of our canceled checks. The reason why I say this is because if you ever get audited by the federal or the state government, they want copies of those canceled checks. And if you don't have copies and you go into the bank and ask them for it, they charge you $1 for each copy of a canceled check. So the cost to get that each month is a little to nothing compared to if you ever got audited by the IRS or the state. So you want to make sure you have copies of your canceled check, front and back. Okay? Because the government will ask you. You can give them a check up front. They don't want to see that. They want to see that behind there, just check, as I said before, this check was cashed, and who cashed it was the person that it was payable to for the expense that is paid for. Right? So you just want to make sure you have a copy of each one of those, your rent checks, when you're submitting your loan forgiveness package. The next thing is you want records of other PPP expenses, you want your receipts, you want your invoices, and you want your ACH drafts. So ACH drafts are any electronic drafts that you have. You want receipts of those payments. A good note, a good tip to have as a business owner, and I tell all of my business owners, when you go into stores, when you're purchasing something, always opt in to have your receipt printed and emailed to you. Because we know receipts fade. If you sit them in the room for a long time, if you sit them out, the ink fade. But if you have it as an email, you can always go back to that email and set it up. You can actually set up an email. I suggest to some of my clients, you can always set up an email, right, where you just want receipts to go to. So when you go into Staples, Home Depot, now they ask, do you want the receipt email or print? You want both, because that way you have a record of it. And so if it's an electronic fund, right? Electronic funds always email you the receipt. You always want to opt in to have that receipt email. That makes sense to everyone? So you want to keep receipts of all payments for PPP and non-PPP going forward. Now, the next thing, which is so important, and a lot of business ask me, a lot of business have business debt prior to COVID that they're paying. And so they will want to see copies. If you're paying off a debt that was prior to February the 15th, the bank is want to see statements of interest of those debts that you're paying through the PPP funds, right? Before February the 15th. You should either have them in an email or you should have them paper copy. If you have an email, that's just as fine. You can print them out, okay? If you have a scan is acceptable just as a paper copy, but you're going to need statements of interest you paid on debt, business debt. This is just business debt. We're not talking about personal debt. This is just business debt that you had prior. If you have business debt that is specifically for your business and they put the debt in your name and not your business name, that is fine as well. But you have to prove that even though this is in my name, I use this loan to pay off things in my business. That should have been agreement with who you had the loan with or the debt with. So you just want to make sure that you have statements saying, hey, these are the debts I had before February the 15th, and this is what I used the debt for, okay? The next big and major thing, which I believe a lot of us who has employees are struggling with, is copies of job offers and job refusals, firing, volunteer resignations, or any reduction in employee or reduction in work hours. The reason why you need this is because if you have a reduction in employees or or pay or salary, you would need to document this for the Loan Forgiveness Act. I'll go over the forgiveness application form briefly today, but they have two forms. They have an easy form, and then they have a long form with a Schedule A. And so the reason for that, the difference is reduction in employees, full-time employees, or reduction in salary paid out. So you need to, and then if someone left the company or you couldn't keep the staff, you're going to have to prove that you offered the job to someone else, you market the job, People refuse the job. You have to prove if you have to fire employees during this process for whatever reason, you have to prove why you fired them, not just because you wanted to benefit off the loan money to keep for yourself. And that's the reason why they're asking these questions. If an employee decides they wanted to move on to another job, you need to be able to prove that they resign, right? This type of record keeping is great, not just for PPP. Going forward, we should all get into practice of using these record keeping, especially with employees, um, job offers, refusals, firing, anything like that. Even if some employees said, hey, I need to, we have some employees that have school-age children right now, and some of them are struggling with homeschooling. I mean, the kids being home at school doing work at home. And so some of the employees may ask, I need a reduction in hours because I need to be home with my kids while they're online at school. So you just want to have this information available and ready, just to have it and show proof. Because remember, like I said, our main goal here is to get 100% forgiveness. It's doable. I don't know if some of you have already spent all of the money, but this is giving you time to go back and figure it out and backtrack and say, hey, did I use the money properly? If I did, this is what I need to do. So this is giving you time to start thinking about it, going back, getting all this together, because you will have to submit this information in a timely manner. Because if you don't submit it in a timely manner, then you may receive zero forgiveness. So this is the time where you need to go back and revisit all of these areas specifically for a PPP loan. And then some of these areas, well, all of these areas may be a great way to put in practice now for your business. Even if you're self-employed, you don't have employees, I always say, and I always go back and say, if you're paying yourself, you want to document it. I always said, with the PPP money, you should write out a check to yourself and indicate on that memo line, because that memo line, believe it or not, a lot of us don't realize when you're writing out a check, what you put in that memo line is so important. If any government agency, if they ask for these cash checks, they look at that memo line. So even if you're self-employed and you didn't have any employees, I recommended that you write out a check, or that would have been the best way so that you could have some proof. But if you did not, if you just automatically electronically sent it to your personal bank account, right? You're just going to have to show proof that this is what I paid myself. I transferred it from here to my business account to my personal account. The bank wants to see that. And if you come prepared with all of that information and you circle it on your bank statement and say, this is my wages to me, it would help. And then you will not be denied, because our main purpose here, and I can't stress this, is that we want to make sure that we get 100% forgiveness. So if we are prepared now, we don't want to give the banks or the institution any reason to decline us for 100%. Our target is to reach 100% forgiveness. Okay? So is that clear to everyone? Is everyone pretty much clear to all of this? The next thing is, I don't know if you have an accountant, if you have someone that's going to complete this form for you, or if you are going to complete the form yourself. So, like I said, the banks are now accepting whoever you receive your loan from. is accepting the loan forgiveness application form. There are two types of forms. The form name is SBA Form 3508 EZ Form and Form 3508. You must, in order to get forgiveness, and I cannot stress this enough, you must submit this form to get forgiveness, 100% forgiveness, with your proof of documents. The documents I just covered needs to be submitted with this form in order for you to qualify for 100% forgiveness. Okay? It is so important that you submit this with the documents. You can submit the form 3508 EZ if you did not have any changes in your full-time employee or no wage reduction. You can use the EZ form. Okay? If you had changes to your full-time employees or wage reductions for whatever reason, you must submit the form 3508, right? I don't know if you're submitting the forms yourself. They are, to some of us, it may be simple, it's straight, clear, but if not, I stress, I don't know how important I stress, seek professional assistance if you cannot complete these forms, because it is worth you getting 100% forgiveness as opposed to paying back any of this loan money, PPP loan money, back to the bank at 1%. So as business owners, I always say we can't do it all. I just suggest if some people can't afford to pay professionals, I don't know if they will have people that will assist you in that, but there probably will be going forward, but I don't want anyone to be caught and not applying or giving up and saying, I can't do the paperwork or whatever. I suggest that you all ask for some assistance in completing this form if you can't do it yourself. They're basically simple forms that you complete. The EZ form is 1-2 pages, and then, as I said, the 3508 has a Schedule A on it. And so once you submit this form with all of your proof, and I said if you have to go an extra step to get that proof, to send that proof when you submit the documents, I recommend that you do it so that you'll get 100% forgiveness. And what happens is the SBA and the lender decides on what percentage of forgiveness for your loan that you can receive. The more prepared you are, the more proof you submit, canceled checks, front and back, documentation, the more you will qualify to get 100% forgiveness on your loan. And that's our goal, to get 100%. We want to get 100%, right, as business owners, so that we don't have to pay back any of this loan. And we don't know what the tax implications are going to be, okay? So with that being said, are you ready for I'll say 100% PPP loan forgiveness, right? So now I am open for answering questions and answers with anyone that has it. And if it's anything you did not understand, please let me know. At the beginning, like Priscilla said, you will be getting this webinar documents for everything that I went over today. And thank you so much for participating today. So do you have any questions? I'm open now, Priscilla, for any questions.
Okay, so we have a question from Greg. Greg asks, how to deal with an occasional employee? We are a two-person company, the owner and myself. The owner's son works very occasionally as well. He is paid on the books with all proper withholding.
Okay. So that's great. And so basically, he's on there occasionally. So when you submit your documents to your lender, you're going to let the lender know that this employee is not a full-time employee. He's basically, we could say, a part-time employee, and you're going to let the lender know that these are his hours, or he just comes in when we need him. So if you have full disclosure to your lender, then they will understand, and then it will not be counted as a reduction in employees in salary. Okay, is that clear? Correct.
I think he also followed up and said, Greg followed up and said, the owner and I have received our regular pay without any cause, but the owner's son has never had any regular hours, and we don't know how to compare his hours before and after COVID.
Okay, so what you're going to do, as I said before, you're going to let your lender know, right? And I hope every one of you are communicating with your lender. I know some of you did this online and you never had communication with a lender, but I want you to make sure you can go, you can talk to somebody, someone needs to call you and say, hey, this is what the situation is. And how would I report this to you so that you don't think I had a reduction in employees? So ask the lender, how should you submit that? And I like for you to go directly to your lender, call the office or call wherever and say, look, I need to know I'm submitting my loan forgiveness package, and this is, I need to know how I'm going to deal with this employee. But if you have them on W-2, that's great because it will account for your payroll costs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Donna asked, if we have employees who voluntarily left, can we exclude them from the forgiveness formula if they left during the look back period, or only if they left during the covered period?
Okay, so Donna, question to you. Did you did you have any documentation of why these employees left? Do you have like in your employment section records of why these employees left? Did they leave voluntarily? Why did they leave? If they left voluntarily, do you have that documented? If you do not have it documented, I would like for you going forward, anyone that leaves voluntarily, have them sign something saying that they left the company voluntarily. So you would have to have full disclosure to your lender and let them know this is the reason why these employees left. And Donna, did you try to replace these employees? If you did try to replace them, did you interview anyone? Did you put job offers in? Did you go to any type of agency? Do you have any type of proof that you tried to replace these employees? So you need reasons why the employees voluntarily left, right? You want a record of that. And you also want to have some type of record of you were trying to replace the employees. And you want to have that full disclosure to your bank, your lender. I recommend also to each and every one of you, before you submit your package to your lender, call them. Call them, because now your client, if anything, you got a loan from them. And look, I'm trying to submit this and I want to submit it properly. What should I do in this case? Trust me, they have people on hand that's specifically dealing with the PPP loans application. Okay, did that help, Donna?
Okay. While we wait for her to answer,
Okay.
a few people asked this, including Peter. I think question. Let me scroll up to the first one. It says, what if we've already not had separate accounts, but use QuickBooks? My accountant advised me to just use QuickBooks and said I didn't need separate accounts. And Peter also followed up and said, if you did not have separate accounts, how do we deal with this now?
Okay, so if you did not have a separate account, this is what you're going to do. You're going to make your accountant work now, since he said you didn't need one. What you're going to do is have your accountant go back and itemize what was used with the PPP loan. And it has to be the expenses that are in the PP loan guidelines, right? So, because if you give the bank or your QuickBooks, right? How would the bank know what was applied to PPP and what was applied out of your regular bank account, regular bank business fund? So you want to go back to your accountant, because now what you want to do as well is get all of your documentation, your proof of your documentation of what you use the PPP loan money for. So you want to go back, have your accountants itemize it, and that's the backup you're going to need to submit to the bank. But you're going to need those proof of documents when you do that to get 100% forgiveness. Okay.
Okay, great. The other question, so we had that. When you get a report from your payroll company, is it going to show the IRS taxes paid as well? That's from Marza. Marza, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly.
Okay, so Marza, yes. So this is it. I do know personally that Paychecks, right, and ADP and Prime Point, those guys have a specific report. So if you're using one of the larger payroll companies, you would just call your payroll representative and let them know you need the report for your PP loan forgiveness. And those reports has been approved by SBA for us to submit for the loan forgiveness. Now, if you have a smaller payroll company, then you would need the IRS that you paid the IRS in the state quarterly reports. You can use those as well, or who's ever handling your payroll. They need to separate it for the time period, whether you're using 8 weeks or 24 weeks. But if you're using a larger payroll company like Paychecks, ADP, Prime Point, those companies, most of them know that we have to submit this stuff for PPP loan forgiveness, and they will just send you a report that you can just print out or attach and submit it with your loan forgiveness application.
Okay. She also asked, Marissa also asked, are the union contributions considered forgiveness? Are considered for forgiveness, I guess.
So you're saying union payments? Is the employee union payment or union contribution? Explain. Are you saying the payments, union dues? Is that what you're referring to?
There's no responses yet.
Okay.
We can circle back to that question.
Okay.
Karen asks, is proof a signed letter by the employee that shows reduction of hours or voluntary resignation?
Yes. Yes. Yes, definitely. That will be your best proof if you have some type of signed letter or documentation from that specific employee. Yes, that's the best proof, because that will be the only way that you will be able to prove that the person volunteered. resign voluntarily. And I say this to all of you going forward. Don't just use that method for PPP. You should be using that method for your business all every time, because if a person voluntarily resign and then they go apply for unemployment, the unemployment agency will ask you that question: did the person volunteer to resign or did you fire them? So that should be a practice you should be using in your business at all times.
Okay. It says here anonymous, but here's the questions. For Form 3508 or 3508EZ, the SBA used my 2019 numbers for payroll and employees because I started using payroll on January 1st, 2020. So they calculated using 2019 instead. So now I have employees more than what they counted. Do I still use the 3508 form if employee numbers increased or only if it decreased?
If it increased and it covered the entire amount, then you can use the easy. Their only concern is if you reduce employee or reduce um, reduction in work hours. But if it increased, then you're great, you're fine. They're actually happy that it did increase because that's showing that the loan did assist you in your business and help your business to grow.
Okay. Glenn Goldstein asks, banks do not seem to have repayment applications available yet. When will that happen?
So now the thing is, each bank has their own guidelines. I know some of my clients, they start receiving emails. So check your bank, your emails, or reach out to your bank and say, how would you know when you're going to start accepting the application forgiveness? But they should be getting them all out soon. If they have it, if you haven't received the email, reach out to your bank and say, hey, when are you expected? But I believe it should be coming up soon because they need to get this submitted, and it needs to be submitted before the 24 weeks is over.
Okay. Kenny asked, can you use the PPP for workman's comp and general liability insurance payments?
Yes. So it is covered for business insurance, right? And you just got to have proof. Right. Because workman comp and general liability for the business is covering the insurance. In order for you to run your business, in some jobs, they have to have, it's mandatory. And in the state of New Jersey, if you have payroll, everyone should have workman comp. So yes, you can use it for that.
Okay. Lakishmi asked, sorry, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. We are a mom and pop business with owner plus 2 employees. Is 401k covered as part of payroll benefits?
It is. So if you are funding your employees, right? Some of their 401k plan, yes, if you are funding it as an employer. But if the employee is funding their funds 100%, then that's not a deduction for you because they're paying it out of their income. It's not an expense to you. But if you are funding it and you're paying part of it, yes. But if the employees is paying 100%, no, because it's just being deducted out of their salary. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay.
Another question here from Martin. He asks, I had to put 3 employees on unemployment in March, a month prior to my PPP loan. Our workload is smaller and these employees are no longer needed. How do you answer the question on page 2 of 3508 easy application?
So if you easy, so if you have reduction, right?
Yeah.
So if you had a reduction, this was prior to the PPP?
Yes, he said it was prior. Yeah, he put 3 employees on unemployment a month prior to his PPP loan.
Okay, so you will not use the EZ, you will use the Schedule A, and then that has a detailed documentation of how you should code that. And then you have to give full disclosure. As I always say, you need to give full disclosure to your lender on how you should record those employees. And the reduction could have been in reduction in business, of course, because of what happened. And so you just need to have a full disclosure of that, and that's why. And what they will do is make a determination if you get 100% forgiveness or you get a not 100%, less than 100% forgiveness. So that's why it's important that when you submit it, you show proof of documentation of why you had to reduce your employees.
Okay. Marissa, she doubled back. So originally, I think she was the one that asked, are the union contributions considered forgiveness? And so she says she meant union contribution, health, pension, severance, I guess those benefits. I don't know if that helps with her
Right.
question.
So if there are employee benefits, yes, but say if it's union benefits and it's union dues, right? So usually most companies, if it's union dues, that's coming out of the employee paycheck. And that is not a deduction for you as a business owner because you're not paying that. It's really the employee is paying that. So if you have any benefits that you're offering to the employees, right? But it's actually coming out of the employee paychecks. That's really not expense to you because the employee is covering that. So you're really not covering that because the employee is covering that. So I know most of the time union dues, the employee pays for that out of their income. And so that's really not an expense to that's really not expense to an employer. The same like sales tax. A lot of businesses get it confused, but sales tax is really not an expense because the customer is paying the sales tax.
Okay. We have a few questions from Peter. Peter asks,
Mhm.
does the 60% of payroll costs include subcontractors?
No. So remember I said subcontractors, independent 1099 miscellaneous forms does not include payroll costs. They said no payroll. Independent contractors, no.
Okay. He also follows up, does QuickBooks do the PPP payroll report?
It does not, but if you detail QuickBooks and create a report that's specific to the information you need. So if you go in QuickBooks and say, I want payroll information during this time period, it can do that. And then if you say, I want all the payroll expenses during this time period, QuickBooks can do that. So you can make QuickBooks specific as what you need in QuickBooks for the PPP. But remember, QuickBooks is just a report. You're still going to have to submit other documentation like your federal employee filing, your state employee filing along. You can give them the QuickBooks report, but you're going to still need to give them proof that you actually pay these salaries.
Peter also asks, how do you decide between 8 weeks and 24 weeks?
Well, the first thing I would say, if all of your expenses didn't cover 8 weeks, then you definitely want to use 24 weeks so that you get 100% loan forgiveness. But if all of your expenses covered the whole entire 8 weeks, then you could use the 8 weeks. But if it didn't cover if all of your expenses didn't cover the entire loan amount in 8 weeks, then definitely go to the 24 weeks. Because the more you use the money, the more percentage of the forgiveness you will be forgiven.
Okay. He says also the owner makes 100K per annum. How do we account for this?
100K. You cannot go over 100,000. So remember now, they said the maximum you can go for the payroll for any employee is $100,000. So if that person has bonuses and things like that and is placing them over 100,000, no.
Okay, good. Kenny asks, I employ home health aides who are considered essential workers and during COVID had to increase their hourly rate of pay in order to keep them working. Does this qualify for loan forgiveness due to increased payroll expenses?
Of course, yes, definitely. Because now you spend more expenses and then that qualify you for more percentage of the forgiveness. Definitely, yes.
Okay. Karen, I think this may have been answered earlier, but I'll repeat here. What kind of documentation is acceptable to show why we had to reduce employment?
So one of them was if you had a letter or some type of contract from the employee why you had to reduce would be great. But if you do not have that information, you're going to have some explanation in why, in just cause of why your employment. It could be that you wasn't making business during COVID and you had to reduce the employees, or your business didn't open. Like, let's look at a lot of the restaurants. They definitely had to reduce their employees during this period. So if you have a justification that makes sense, it's acceptable. But if anything you have in writing would be even better. So, and I think, like I said before, this practice should be great going forward without PPP. If a person voluntarily resigned, or if a person you had to fire them, I think you should always have some type of documentation in your records of why there is a change.
Okay, we have a question from Michael.
Okay.
If my company will cease operations and the operation of the nursing facilities will be sold during the 24-week covered period, can I use the 24-week covered period until the date of the sale, or am I forced into using the 8-week covered period, or is there a different option?
You can use, now for that, I would recommend you use the 24 weeks because that's showing that you try to keep the business open, or you tried to hold on, or whatever, and using the expense of the PPP. And so I would use the 24 weeks if you using those expenses just to keep afloat or whatever. And then at the end, if you decide, I don't know if you decided to sell because you just want to resell or whatever, but that way it'll be a better explanation for the bank. And then that particular question, I suggest that you consult with your lender and how they would like for you to deal with that.
Okay. Martin asks, I think this again was addressed, do you have to wait for 24 weeks to file?
Not if, and I said before, not if you already used all the funds. So if you already used the funds up, I say file immediately. Because then that way you don't have to worry about, did I spend in this account? If you open up a separate account, so you want to make sure if you would exhaust all the forms, you use them, submit it as soon as possible, because there's going to be a deadline where you would have to submit this information in order to be qualified for the forgiveness. So the sooner the better.
Okay, so we have just a few more.
Okay.
Can you pay bonuses to the employees from PPP loan, from a PPP loan?
If it's not over 100,000 and it's included as a W-2 and not a 1099.
Okay. Another question, how does the accountant submit itemized expenses? Specific form? Is there a specific form I should inform him of?
So your accountant needs to go back and first itemize what we're going to say. You need to sit with your accountant and understand, what are we going to say we use the PPP funds for, right? You need to have that conversation because your accountant needs to know what qualify for the expenses, right? Once you decided on what you're going to use, because there may be more expenses that qualify, and then it may be some that doesn't. So you want to make sure you and the accountant sit together and say, this is what we're going to say we use the funds for that qualify under these expenses, right? And then when you say that, you're going to have to get documentation. Either you have the bills, you have the invoices, you have forms that you submitted. You're going to have proof, because all you have is that QuickBooks, or if you don't have the QuickBooks, you got to have proof that these are what we used it for, and these are the bills I received for this to make those payments. So that's something I suggest that you sit with the accountant so both of you are clear on what expenses covered the PPPs.
What will they submit those expenses on? I think that's what he wants to know. Is there a form that they will be listing these expenses on?
No, you're going to have your actual documentation. So if it's rent, if you're paying rent for your business location, remember I said you're going to use your lease and cancel checks. If it's insurance, right? Say if it's insurance, you normally get that, I can't remember the page, the cover page of the insurance that'll show that this is what was due and this is what I paid. So you're going to use the actual, my recommendation is use the actual bill itself or the actual canceled check itself. I would use both so that they know they don't have to come back to anything. I paid the telephone bill. Say, for instance, you have a business line. I paid the telephone bill. This is the telephone bill, and this is the payment or the ACH payment that paid this bill. So you need the actual bill if it's a bill and the canceled check.
Okay, we have a question from Asha. So I'm guessing this is asking if this is covered by PPP. She listed insurance premium that covers malpractice.
Yes.
So is that covered by PPP?
Definitely, yes. Because that is your business insurance and you have to have that in order to operate. Yes.
All right, Karen, I think we have 2 more questions. If there's any more, we have about 5 minutes. So I'll be taking the last few questions. Karen says, I opened up a separate account and the balance is 0. They are charging fees on the account. Should I close it or keep it open until I receive the decision for forgiveness?
So they're charging fee. If you can manage to keep it open, that would be good. I would recommend, and I'll tell you why. Just until they make that decision. And the reason why I say that is because I think I said it before, that if you close the account, right, you will not have, and you want to get your bank statements, cancel checks, and things like that, you could do online. You will still have access to that and you could get it free of charge online. But if you close the account, then you would have to go into the bank. And the banks usually, once you close the account and you're trying to get bank statements and check copies, they will charge you a fee for each additional page or each additional document that they have to print out. So I would recommend that you try to keep it open if you can afford to, just until they give you something in writing saying that your loan was 100% forgive.
Okay. Yancy asks, what happens if I pay the bills online? So I'm guessing this is, how do she use that as documentation?
Okay, so when you pay the bills online, is coming out of your bank account. So that ACH document, proof is on your bank statement. But then you receive the bills either from the company or something like that. My recommendation is go online. Say like your telephone bill is they send it to you electronically. Just print that electronic bill they send to you, and that would be your proof that you were billed, because they do know a lot of time people don't get paper bills anymore, and so you could just go whatever company it is and ask them to give you proof of electronic bill. And then I know like some of the utility companies, what they have been doing, I know when people were applying for PPP, the electronic utility company excuse me, were actually sending people reports of their billing statements.
Okay. I think that's about, you're welcome, Karen. Karen says, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
I don't see any other question. We'll circle for one more minute and then we'll close.
Great. Those are great questions.
Okay, and I know there was one Karen asked earlier. They're looking to see if the same or actual staff are there, or the number of staff is still the same. I'm not sure what that is related to.
Okay, so I understand. They're looking to see if their main thing is that you have the same amount of staff. So say if a staff left and you replace the staff, that's great. That's what they want. That's what they wanted. And so as long as you kept the same amount of staff, that's great. It doesn't matter who that person was, as long as you were able to keep up your same amount. That's fine. That's what they wanted. Yes.
All right, so I think that's about it for the questions for today.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna double check here. If not, we're gonna close out the presentation. So one last call for questions before we close.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think that's it. So Mary, we would like to thank you very much for another informative presentation. You've had a long day. You've been presented since this morning. So we would like to thank you for taking the time out to update us on PPP. For those of you here who are attending, there will be another webinar on PPP further down, closer to the end of the year, where there may be some more updates. So feel free to visit our calendar and RSVP for that webinar. Maybe a lot more information will be available at that time, as SBA is still fine-tuning this as we go along. For those who you may have other questions, you may need assistance with applying for the loan forgiveness. The SBDC, as I said earlier, the SBDC is here to provide that help to you at no cost. Please feel free to reach out to us. The information is here on the screen. Request a one-on-one Mary or we have other consultants on board who are knowledgeable about the PPP that can answer any of your questions you have and assist you with the application or preparing for the application when that time comes. So simply just visit our website at www.rnsbdc.com and click the button in the header that says request counseling, fill the form out, and we will gladly assign you a consultant who can answer your questions and work with you at no cost. I did mention that we are one of 12 centers and our jurisdiction is Essex County. But if you're outside of Essex County, there is an SBDC that is for each county. We will gladly connect you with your local SBDC and they will provide you with someone to assist you with anything PPP related, or if it can be marketing, it can be accessing capital, it can be procurement, whatever your needs may be, we have someone that can help you. As I mentioned before, a copy of this PowerPoint presentation will be sent out along with the video recording from today's webinar. It is Friday and sometimes it takes a while for us to download and edit the video and put it back up for your review. So please give us up to 48 to 72 hours to get that out to you. So if there's no further questions, Mary, did you have anything else to add?
Thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you. And just keep in mind, our goal is for you to get 100% loan forgiveness. So thank you. It's been a pleasure and good luck with all of you. Thank you.
All right. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing you on our upcoming webinars. They're at no cost, so we look forward to seeing you at our webinars next week and in the coming weeks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.